Welcome along to the Matchbook Cheltenham Trail, the penultimate episode of the series. I'm your host, Daniel Hussey. Delighted to welcome, as always, every week, Matt Toombs and Donn McClean. And a special guest this week, outside the Matchbook bubble, it's Jake Price, or you probably have seen him on Twitter, at Jake Price Racing. Jake, tell us a little bit about yourselves. The Cheltenham Handicap Weights are a bit of your forte, I'm finding out, over the last few weeks.
Yeah, I love putting up as much information for everyone as I can on all the handicaps, be that entries or weights or whatever we have. So, yeah, been doing that for the last couple of years. Also on the Jump Show with Dan Overall, who's also been on the show before. So, yeah, you can find me there if you want to check out some more stuff.
Yeah, Matt, it's always good. There's young up and comers trying to get your spots here with handicap weights, trends, stuff like that, Matt. You better up your game.
I think you're pointing to the fact that Don and I are a little older than Jake.
I'm a young up and comer. I don't know about you, Matt.
I like to be thought I was up and coming. No, it's great. It's great to have not just new people on, but people with new views. You know, some of us have been doing this for a heck of a long time, and it's hard sometimes to adapt to things that are changing. If you're relatively new to it, you often take in the change better, and you come with a different perspective, which is great.
Yeah, Don, I've been saying your experience in this Cheltenham front, but joking aside, you've seen a lot of Cheltenham previews over the years and how they've got developed and almost since post-COVID, a lot of online stuff, and there's just so much good information out there, I would say.
Yeah, no, it's obviously it's a different landscape to the landscape that when I was getting going, like back then, the Cheltenham events, they were obviously you have to be physically present, and you kind of hear rumors, some of them true, some of them not, about what went on somewhere else. But now with online, it's sure, it's all accessible to everybody, which is great. But as Matt said, yeah, you need to keep on trying to come up with new angles and new ways of looking at things. But fundamentally, my views remain fairly constant with a few tweaks along the way. But yeah, no, it is interesting to hear everybody's views. All right.
And yeah, Matt, before we start, I think it's important to mention this in the podcast. You obviously have a lot of trends articles going out at the moment, but one of them last year, I think it was is Cheltenham anti-post betting dead, and you sort of spoke about the differences in Cheltenham anti-post betting nowadays, that there is still angles to get. You might just have to bet on a handicap, maybe, in that 6-day declaration entry stage, as opposed to maybe on the day. Little things like that, based on the horse, based on the race, etc.
Definitely, and things keep evolving. As Don says, a lot of the stuff stays the same, and you can keep using it, but you're constantly looking for new angles. And this is a good time, I think, to be betting on some of the handicaps, particularly the more predictable ones, the Ultima, the Temps Final, the Kinmure, where the horses that win tend to win from the front of the SP market, and they shorten in from now, so you can get on the gamble at the moment. So definitely worth looking at those festival weights and thinking about bets in the next few days.
Okay, yeah, we will have good Cheltenham handicap weights chat at the end of the show. Just to say, we're going to skip the weekend review and sort of cover them in our Eyecatcher section, about 6-7 horses between the three guys here in the Eyecatchers. We're going to cover 3 races that we've had entries yesterday for. So the Cross Country Champion Bumper and Hunter's Chase, particularly the last one you wouldn't have heard much about in terms of entry, in terms of preview. So we're trying to give you something different, point you in the right direction, perhaps backing a winner on the day. And last thing to say, both Matt and Don were on our Cheltenham preview night. Really fun night. It's over on our YouTube channel and in your podcast feed. Well worth checking out, and you can enter a few competitions there as well. Full details of that is in the description of the video. But we will start with Eyecatchers. Don, you've got 3 here on the eye-catching section. So talk to us a little bit about that, because there was some decent racing over the weekend.
There was, yeah. Look, 2 of them are from the Ferry House Saturday card, and I've only put the 2 of them up because we could have seen the Grand National winner and the Irish Grand National winner on the same day. I Maximus, he's not a below the radar or below the parapet type of horse. He's now, I suppose, disputing favoritism for the Grand National, but I still think he might be underrated. I know he's got his own way of doing things, and he is at his best at Ferry House. His best form is at Ferry House. He's won an Irish Grand National, he's won a Drinmore Chase, and now he's on a Bobby Joe Chase. But I just thought the way that he went on towards the end of the race, like he was doing his usual kind of getting in tight defenses, going to his left early on. But once Jody McGarvey got him going forward, the performance that he put up was really impressive. And Willie Mullen seemed to be quite impressed and maybe even a wee bit surprised by it. Afterwards, even down to the last, he went to his left again. Jody thought he saw a stride. The horse thought he didn't, changed his mind and popped out over it. But he's been raised by £6 for that run to an Irish mark of 164. He's racing off his mark going into the race 158. His Grand National mark is 159. So he's still going to be £5 well in, and that's on his new Irish mark. So, we know that horses who are well in a Grand National, they can do very well. The Bobby Joe Chase has been a really good pointer to the Grand National in the past. Hedge Hunter won both races. Rath Linden won the Bobby Joe, finished third in the Grand National, and he's second now. Won the Bobby Joe in 2022, finished second behind Noble Yates. Black Appalachia, he's won and run well in Bobby Joe Chases and finished second behind Don't Push It in the Grand National. Was travelling really well the year before when he unseated at Beaches Brook second time. So it is a race that kind of a really good pointer, and of course, crucially, it's run after the Grand National weights have come out. So I am Maximus, he's a well handicapped horse going into the race, even though he's going to have a high weight. Hopefully Hewitt will run, and that will keep his weight down lowish. He's not going to be for everybody because he is quirky, but he's won an Irish Grand National, which is a big pointer to entry. As we know, he had the class and the pace to win a Drinmore Chase over 2.5 miles. I know it's a novice's race. It was his last day as a novice, but that's 2.5 miles. And while he's really good at Ferryhouse, he does jump to his left. So hopefully he doesn't go too violently to his left, and we don't know how any horse is going to take to entry. But going left is no handicap at entry. And I just think that he really put a stamp on his Grand National claim there on Saturday in the Bobby Joe Chase. Half an hour later, Intense Raffles won the rated novices chase, and I think this fella's really exciting, and I think he's under the radar still. I think one firm went up on the Irish National, and he wasn't even in the betting, but it does look like the race for him. He's only run twice now over fences. He's interesting because he's trained by Tom Gibney for Simon Munir and Isaac Swade. He's the first horse that Tom Gibney has had for Simon Munir and Isaac Swade, and chatting to him after he won at Ferryhouse the last day, he obviously thinks an awful lot of him, but his jumping was so good. I know it was only a 3-horse race, but Brompton Bell and Good Time Johnny, as we've spoken about Good Time Johnny plenty in the past, they closed up on the run to, I think it was the 4th last, and Darryl Jacob just saw a stride, gave Intense Raffles a squeeze, and he pinged it and then came clear. That was 3 miles, 1.5 furlongs. He was raised to a mark of 140, so he was given a £13 hike for that performance, and you kind of thought he would get something like that, but that's fine. 140. I think that the lowest weight in the Irish National last year was 134, so 140 gets him safely into the race. We know he's got form at Ferryhouse. We don't know if he stayed 3 miles 5, but that was 3 miles 1.5, and he saw that really well. I just think he's a classy horse. He's a progressive horse. He's unexposed, and I think he's going to be very interesting now when the markets for the Irish Grand National become more robust. And the last one then was at Kempton in the 2.5 mile handicap chase, Champagne Mystery. It wasn't run at a fast pace, this race. He was in behind early on. He stayed on really well towards the end. It didn't look like he was going to win. He got in tight to the 3rd last, and that was kind of the final nail in his chance of winning the race. But he stayed on really well to finish 3rd. And I think in a more strongly run race, he could be seen to much better effect. He stays well. I was thinking, like, he's got good form on flat tracks. He ran really well on flat tracks earlier in his career. And I think that there's a 2.5 mile handicap chase at Kempton. You know, the Kempton meeting after the Cheltenham Festival, that could be a race for him over the same course and distance as the course and distance over which he put up this performance. He's back now with Tom George. He was in France with Noel George, but like, he's 10 years old, but I still think there's more to come from him off a mark of 128, especially given a stronger pace at this intermediate trip.
Okay, that's Intense Raffles, I Am Maximus, and Champagne Mystery. This week's Eyecatchers for Donn. Jake, over to you. You've got a couple from the weekend.
Yeah, a couple that didn't win, but they're very interesting, especially in terms of Cheltenham handicaps for, obviously, the Cheltenham Festival coming up. The first one is No Ordinary Joe, who ran at Kempton on Saturday. It was a 2 mile 5 handicap hurdle at Kempton, and there was 8 non-runners. But despite this, his price of 12 to 1 the night before ended up opening up at 10 to 1 on track. So there was absolutely zero money for him, despite the field cutting up basically in half. So it kind of said all you needed to know, especially as Kevin Brogan was also on board. So I think he was very much there for a prep run for Cheltenham. He took your eye out if you watched the race. He stayed on strongly at the finish behind Mark of Gold, who's also in the Coral Cup. I think No Ordinary Joe is probably going to end up in the Coral Cup now with the way that the weights have worked out, which we'll touch on later in the show. But yeah, he'd be very much one that's on the radar for Nicky Henderson and JP McManus. And then the other one is Cletus Poulor, who qualified for the Potemps final this weekend. He ran at Nace in a Potemps qualifier that I think caught a lot of people out. It didn't really seem to get much attention in the media beforehand, or even earlier on in the season where perhaps it was, decided to be held. So I think it caught a lot of people out when we saw it pop up on the calendar. But anyway, it was a race where Gordon ended up, throwing quite a few bullets at it to try and make sure that he had something for the Potemps final to go to war with. And Cletus Poulor has ended up qualifying in second place there. It was a good run behind Noble Birth, who obviously wanted to win that and win that well to try and get up the handicap enough to get a run in the race, which he has potentially done. But Cletus Poulor finished in second there. It was a good run from him. He's one of the very few unexposed novices that are going to be in the Potemps final now. I know he's got a short turnaround. It's only 2.5 weeks between this qualifier and the final at Cheltenham, but he could be well ahead of his mark. He's been put up £5 to 139 in Britain, which obviously isn't going to help him, but he could be, one of the only unexposed novices in the race that could go on and prove to be very much better in the future.
Yeah, no ordinary Joe, definitely the eye-catcher of all eye-catchers, I would say. Cletus Poulor. Just on that, Jay, do you know when that race was added to the calendar? You mentioned it might have been the start of the season, or no? Don't know.
I have honestly no idea. I first noticed at the beginning of February when the Irish racing calendar updated and showed the races on that day. So I have no idea. There was no press release that I could find.
Don, yeah, any idea? I know we spoke about it in the WhatsApp group and got nowhere, but
yeah,
it is Trials Day in Naas, isn't it? Or
yeah, no, it's a new race. It's a new qualifier. And on the, it was the BHA website that I checked. It only has the British qualifiers. It only has the qualifiers that are run in Britain. It doesn't have the Irish qualifiers, which is odd. And you think they'd put up all the qualifiers. If they want horses to run in, they'll put them all up there. But no, it's late. As Jake was saying, it is late for a Cheltenham qualifier. Good Time Johnny, of course, was entered in it, was declared for it, but then he ran in the chase at Fairyhouse the day before. So, yeah, it's an interesting case that Jake makes. All right, I'd just be a wee bit concerned about the quickness and the time, but you can see the case all right for Cletus Poulor.
Yeah, Matt, Good Time Johnny, obviously going to mention there, was initially declared for the Potemps qualifier, ran in the chase instead, and it's been raised £10. We'll get into all that in the handicap weights, but if you do want to have a brief line on Good Time Johnny, I know you're dying to get in, and then on to the Eyecatchers.
It's just hilarious, isn't it? I watched that. I've not had a penny on Good Time Johnny for any festival race this year. Just been watching it. To my mind, I don't understand why they didn't aim him at the Potemps final. Yeah, he won that pulling a cart last year. He then very intelligently was run at Aintree off £5 higher. Had his mark 147, finished 6 lengths behind the winner there. So you think that's nicely cemented the mark. And then he can go around messing around, chasing or running over on the beach at Laytown or whatever all season, then go for the qualifier, and you've got your mark in Britain sorted. And you would have thought he could have a great chance off that. But trying to get into Tony Martin's mind, not easy. So I've looked at the other Cheltenham Potemps qualifier. Last one was at Chepstow. Run on heavy ground. That wouldn't have suited Monmoral. Looked to be going well in the straight. Freddie Ginger apparently thought he was going to win, but he got stuck in the mud, faded into fourth, but still qualified. Didn't have to be given a hard time close home, but still a tough enough race 19 days before the Potemps final. As the lads have said, short turnaround. Paul's going to see how he is before deciding whether he runs or not. Maybe he'll go to Aintree for the equivalent race there. He's been a bit of an underachiever since his juvenile campaign, but he did earn a Racing Post rating of 151 and beaten just over 3 lengths by the Real Whacker in the Dipper last year. Completely unexposed as a staying hurdler, and he is off 138. Could be really lenient if he's ready to fulfil his potential now. He's a general 21.0 chance for the Potemps final. He's not a betting proposition at the moment, but he's one to keep an eye out for the vibes about. My other eye catcher was from the Grade 3 winning Fair Juvenile. Again, switched from Fairyhouse to Naas this year. Impressive winner in Bottler's Secret, but there was an interesting horse in second, Pacini. He'd run in the 4-year-old rated novice hurdle here a fortnight ago that's produced 4 of the last 5 winners of the Fred Winter. Looked to get a similar ride to Jazzy Matty there. They've beaten a bit further. First time cheek pieces on here. And there was an indefinable something that shouted to me that he was an Elliott Fred Winter plot, for which he got 120 yesterday. Cut was 119 last year, so he may sneak in at the bottom. I hadn't expected Gordon to run him again. Aramax and Jazzy Matty went straight from that rated 4-year-old hurdle at the previous meeting to Cheltenham. Perhaps it was a desire to experiment with the headgear. He's arguably bred to want a sounder surface, certainly on his dam side. So it wouldn't surprise me if he improved hugely if turning up there. Most of the eye catchers in this series have, I hope, generally been based on solid analysis. This is very much a gut instinct call without too much to back it up, but then it is for the Fred Winter.
Okay, yeah. Winning Fair Form, perhaps, and Monmoral is the two eye catchers for Matt. Incidentally, Good Time Johnny was put up by Pricewise a few weeks ago for the Stairs Hurdle. Does still hold that entry around 55.0 on the Matchbook Betting Exchange if you did think they would perhaps reroute him for that based on his handicap chase. Mark, let's go to the cross country. Matt, I love this trend because we can there's 28 Cheltenham races, and this race is basically down to 2 based on the last 5 renewals. So hit us with your trend first, and I'll bring in the guys.
Yeah, as you say, there's a lot of complexity around a lot of the races, and it's nice to find one that you can have a fairly simple look at. The trend is that in the last 5 renewals, the front 2 in the market have been the first 2 home, not always in that order. The nearest any of the other runners have got to the winner in those 5 renewals was when Sumneck was beaten 20 1/4 lengths in third 3 years ago. And since the Grade 1 horses started running in this, especially those that have been through Gordon Elliott's schooling programme, the handicappers like Foxy Jack have very little chance. Don't be fooled by the form in the autumn handicaps. Gordon's Grade 1 horses are half cooked at the time. And so despite this usually getting close to the full field of 16, slight doubt about that this year, it's a very predictable race. You can normally narrow it down to 3 or 4 runners, even at this early stage.
Yeah, Jay, take it away with your thoughts on the race. Just the prices, incidentally, of the first couple in the market. Manila Indo 3.0, Delta Work 4.5, and then you've Cocoa Beach Galvin at 6.0, Conflated 8.0, 15.0, and bar the rest.
Yeah, it's crazy, isn't it? The desire for owners to have Cheltenham winners has turned this into a bit of a B-tier Gold Cup, hasn't it, this year? We've got Manila Indo, Galvin, Cocoa Beach, Statler as well, Conflated, all Grade 1 horses of the past. Potentially would still have a chance if they ran in them. I think Conflated is probably going to go to the Ryanair. I think that's what Gordon Elliott has come out in his stable tour and started talking about. So I would probably put a line through him for this. Obviously, Manila Indo is very interesting at the head of the market. He's had his spin around Cheltenham in December. It was a very good spin as well, finishing 4th, beaten 5 lengths by Late Night Pass. Obviously, that will have him absolutely spot on for this. I think the horse that would probably interest me most though is Delta Work still. Obviously, as Matt said, you don't have to look too far away from the first 2 in the betting, and I won't be doing so. Delta Work, I think, is obviously won the last 2 renewals, was very good last year when he beat Galvin. And by all accounts, the cross-country, of course, has been underwater. So that's what I heard in a preview night the other night.
Yeah.
And, soft ground is going to be right up his street, isn't it? So if he gets his soft ground, Delta Work would definitely be the play for me yet again. And perhaps Cocoa Beach would be another one who will appreciate that soft ground. I think that he obviously had a good spin around the Punchestown banks, but the fact that he hasn't gone around Cheltenham yet would be a bit of a negative for me. I feel like if he has a good spin around there this year, then he could be one for next year, but perhaps, take on the baton from Delta Work when he's a year older. So that would be the way I'm looking at it at the minute. I think Delta Work would be, the play for me. Yeah,
it reminds me of the Live Golf. We've mentioned this before and seen this on Twitter, but it is very Live Golfy. Don, you've got, Brooks Koepka, Manila Indo, top of the market, but you've got John Ram, Delta Work being there, done that. So where's your thoughts on the top 2, 3, 4 in the betting at the moment?
Yeah, it's an interesting race. Look, Manila Indo, Henry Drum had said very early in the season that this was going to be his race. It was a really good run at the December meeting when he finished 4th. Obviously, that was a handicap. He was given a stone and I think £6 to Late Night Pass. And yeah, look, it was great that he got his odds. You can know why he's favourite. It's been kind of contracting in price all the way along. I think Jake is right. I think Conflated is going to go for the Ryanair chase, so that seems to be the way Gordon's thinking at the minute. Delta Work probably ran well enough in the Boyne Hurdle last time as his kind of warm up. He didn't run as well as Galvin. Galvin stayed on really strongly to finish 4th behind Hidden Valley Lake in that race, and he was 2nd in the race last year on soft ground. And yeah, it was a big run by him there. But I think Cocoa Beach is the most interesting. Like he's a wee bit under the radar. He's a 160 odd rated horse, so he's got the class to go, to be up there with the very good horses in the race. He's a Thyestes winner, a Troytown winner, and I know that the Punchestown cross country course is very different to the Cheltenham course, but the way he skipped over the banks in the PP Hogan race the last day, it was very impressive. He seemed to really love it, and you could tell with Jack Kennedy afterwards, he seemed to get a great kick out of riding him over the banks. So I think there's more. There's like he's unexposed over banks if that's a thing, and I know Jake was saying about experience of this track. I think it's very important. But I think Delta Work won over the track on his first run over, didn't he? A couple of years ago. And Cocoa Beach, given the fluency with which he jumped the banks of Punchestown, it just seemed to love it. He just seemed to love the variety of fences. And yeah, I think he could have the class to maybe shake up the top ones in it.
Okay, yeah, Matt, over to you. Look, interesting case for Cocoa Beach there, Delta Work. Myself a few weeks ago, my bet definitely would have been Manila Indo, but Don sort of touched on that price is dropped from a general 5.5, I'd say, maybe 2 months ago, 1 month ago, into 3.0. So, you know, the money has sort of come from already. He could maybe be a bigger price on the day, who knows?
Yeah, it could be. I do feel you've missed the boat a bit with him, given the quality of the opposition. I think 3.0 is short enough. Cocoa Beach, very interesting. One concern about him is he's a brilliant jumper of a park fence. And so he loses that advantage in these cross-country races, where someone like Delta Work isn't a very good jumper of a park fence and is advantaged by these obstacles. But he's interesting. For me, it's a pretty obvious point. The ground's absolutely crucial. Delta Work last year, he got his ground. Galvin didn't get his ground. And Delta Work had a couple of runs already, won the race the previous year. It was Galvin's debut at the course, and there were only 2.5 lengths between them. Don's touched on the Boyne hurdle. Galvin was really impressive. I thought that was an excellent run. Now, horses improve more than others for their prep, so I wouldn't read too much into that. At the moment, I favour Galvin. I'm on weather watch. As Jake said, David Casey was saying he was underwater at a couple of weeks ago, and there isn't the drainage in the middle of the course that there is on the conventional track, so it rides more naturally. But equally, the weather forecast for the last week up to the meeting is relatively decent at the moment. So you only need a dry week and it ought to be okay. So where I am is I'm waiting on weather watch. If someone gave me a free bet now, I'd have it on Galvin.
Okay, and before we head off to the bumper, is there anything maybe, Matt, on the bigger priced horses that you'd like to give a mention to, or is it very much with that top of the market?
I'm just with the top of the market.
Yeah, same to you, Jake. Don, you can nod your head. Yeah, no panic there. We will stick with don't overcomplicate in the cross country. Basically, stick with the top of the market. But the guys have all made decent cases for different horses, so I'm genuinely none the wiser. In fact, more confused after that. So thanks for that. Let's hope they pick up in the champion bumper. Matt, you have a few trends to hit initially, and then I'll bring in Jake and Don too.
Yeah, and a rather more complicated puzzle here. 3 general trends to set the scene. Firstly, only 2 of the 31 winners were beaten on their previous start. Theory is that almost all bumpers are shallow races. These young, inexperienced horses are improving rapidly in the run-up to the festival. It's therefore unlikely that a horse beaten last time would be good enough against all the fast-improving horses. If they were, that was because the bumper was unusually strong. The last horse to win this after being beaten on the previous start was Lieberman 21 years ago. Horse that beat him was Rhinestone Cowboy, a gone-off favourite for the champion hurdle the previous day. Historically, the bumper programme made clashes like that a rarity. There is now one bumper that's usually a really strong race. That's the Colts and Geldings bumper at DRF. Winners of that have finished 5-1, 2-2, 1-1 at Cheltenham. But the 8 horses beaten at Leopardstown were all beaten again at Cheltenham, and they all 8 finished behind the horse that won at Leopardstown. So whilst it's early days and small samples, so far the same principles held up, opposed the beaten horses in the DRF bumper. 16 of the 37 entries were beaten on their last start. You ought to know in the Yellow Clay. Been a lot of chat about those 2. I'd be keen to oppose them at short prices. Secondly, another negative trend, the record of French-bred horses. They're 2 from 68, 74% loss so far. And the theory is that this is a really tough test for young, inexperienced horses. Go much quicker than in the typically steadier run bumpers during the season. Stamina rather than precocity is at a premium, suiting the more stoutly bred horses from Ireland and Britain. And one of those 2 French-bred was Envoy Len. It's one of the only 2 bumper winners this century to go on and win an open grade 1 over obstacle, so much better than most bumper winners. 11 of the 37 entries French-bred, including 2 of the anti-post leaders, Jasmine Deveau and Jalon Duderi. And finally, experience in bumpers has been a factor. Only 4 winners this century won off 1 bumper run. Last was Briar Hill, 2013. 13 of the 37 entries have had just 1 bumper run, including the 2 anti-post market leaders, Jasmine Deveau and Maureen. It's a tough race for inexperienced horses, totally different to anything they've experienced before, perhaps bar those who run at DRF. So I'd see coming here with just one run in a bumper as a negative.
Okay, yeah, and you can see those trends at the bottom of your screen if you're watching on YouTube. Jasmine DeVoe, 6.5 favourite, along with Maureen, Jelon Dedery, 7.0, Romeo Coolio, 8.0, Tishan, 9.0, you ought to know, 10.0. It's 11.0 and bigger the rest. Don, it's an open bumper as we've had for the last few years, I'd say.
it's so difficult.
Tough. Yeah.
Yeah. Like, I, to be honest, I rarely have a bet in the bumper. It's
Well, I was actually going to ask. I was going to ask about your record in the bumper in general.
Yeah, not good. I think I had a small bet in a Dream to Share last year, all right, but no, and it's not a race that I get too deeply involved in, and I think from half memory when I do, it's not been very successful. But look, it's a fascinating race. Maureen, like, she was so good at Punchestown, and she's of immediate interest because of her pedigree. She's out of a half sister to Faheen, as her name suggests, and she herself is a full sister to Blow Your Wad, who was impressive there at Kempton at the weekend. So she's just had one run, one win. That Dublin Racing Festival bumper that Matt was talking about, coach Jerbon Mashan, is not going to run in the bumper this year. So maybe that that'll have an impact. Obviously, is it then you ought to know who's the kind of best place finisher of that race going into the race? I thought the Yellow Clay, I know he's been kind of been a kind of a wise guy horse for now, but I thought he ran much better than the form of the race suggests in that race. Like, he really was chopped quite badly on the run to the furlong marker, and Barry O'Neill took him back and got him going again towards the outside. He finished off his race really well. He just got up for fourth behind Redemption Day. He was about 3 lengths behind You Ought to Know, who's been well touted as well. Like, he ran well, but I wouldn't be surprised if the Yellow Clay reverse placings with You Ought to Know. That said, Jelon Dedery's beat Redemption Day and beat Redemption Day well in the Christmas race. It stayed on really strongly to beat him that day in Redemption Day. Obviously enhanced that form at the Dublin Racing Festival, but Jelon Dedery's was good in winning that day. And then Jasmine DeVoe was good in winning at Naas the last day. So, and then you got Cantico, who's got a wee bit more experience. He was good in winning at Navan. So obviously, what Patrick Mullins rides, he's got the choice in the bumper. So that's going to be crucial in terms of determining the Willie Mullins pecking order, or at least the start of the Willie Mullins pecking order. Gordon has Romeo Coolio as well in there, who won at Fairley Speed Sporting Glory, Pat Fahey's horse, to enhance that form next time. So there are just so many. Look, to me, it's which horse is going to progress the most from what they've done last time. If forced at the minute, I think Maureen is the one with the breeding and with the performance and with the potential to improve again, and obviously with the mare's allowance. So as a kind of a token pick, Maureen would be my pick at the minute.
No, you've outlined it well there, Don, to be fair, in terms of the different strands of form lines. Jake?
Yeah, you give me a nice easy race to look at here, haven't you? 37 entries, 20 of them Irish, 14 trained by Willie Mullins.
Yeah.
He had 10 runners in the race last year. Do you reckon we can beat that this time?
Oh, over or under 10 and a half. It's probably just over, yeah. We'll go on.
Yeah, it's a very interesting race. It's kind of developed oddly to how it normally does, because usually we get a pretty early anti-post, favourite or well-backed horse at bigger prices throughout the season. So obviously we had Envoy Allen do that. So Gerhard, Vassal Vega was a prime example of that. I think most people were on it. Lots of people seem to be on at 16-1 anti-post, from when he made his debut. A Dream to Share last year as well was, a similar type. So we haven't had that this year. We haven't had, a vintage crop of bumper horses, it seems. Obviously a lot of them for Willie Mullins didn't get going until just after Christmas time, which obviously means that we've got some very unexposed types in here, the likes of Jasmine DeVoe. So it'll be interesting to see how those go. I think Jelon Dedery's is probably like the solid horse in the race for me. I think he's got a brilliant attitude. Obviously he's unbeaten under rules, won his point to point as well. I think it's just with him, it's a shame we haven't seen him at listed or graded level. If he ran at that DRF, it would have been great to see how he matched up with the rest in the field. And that brings in You Ought to Know as well. Obviously Willie's been talking about him in glowing terms in his stable tours, hasn't he? So you've got to take that on board. And in his most recent one, he said that he doesn't know who Patrick will ride, but it's the top two for him were You Ought to Know or Jasmine DeVoe. So I would probably say that no matter which one Patrick picks out of those two, you're probably going to get pulled on the other one, which again is probably the best case scenario if you're going to be having a bet here. So I wouldn't mind You Ought to Know 10-1 each way. 11.0. Yeah. I think that he'd have a good winning place chance. And yeah, between him and Jalan Dudaris for me at the moment, but there's plenty of time to get stuck into the more unexposed ones as well.
Yeah, particularly given how strong the DRF, if you take the winner out, obviously, which we have to, you ought to know, for Luke McMahon and Willie Mullins could be the one there. Matt, over to you here. Another trend, and then give us your thoughts on the race.
Well, quick mention first about weights. Maureen's and Mare carrying 11 stone run the 11.7. The weights have gone up £2, but when Augusta Kate was 4.5 favourite for this a few years ago, Patrick couldn't do the then Mare's weight of 10.12. According to the Racing Post website, the lowest weight he's done in the last 12 months, exactly 11 stone. Whether we want to try and do that in Festival Week, I'm not sure. So when you're looking at the Mullins pecking order and Patrick's choice, bear in mind that Maureen may not be an option for him. So one theory I like is looking at horses that have won by a wide margin last time. On the basis most bumpers are slowly run, sprint clear by a long way, often the sign of a good horse. The fact they're generally shallow races leads punters to dismissing the beaten horses as simply poor. And the trend is that in the last 20 renewals, runners that have won their previous bumper by 6 lengths or more, 11 from 121, 31% profit. The 10 of those 11 winners came from the 14 renewals before DRF began. Only one done in the 6 since. A narrow margin win at the DRF in a much better race can be good enough. But I think with Jeroboam Masham out, the beaten horses at DRF not having won at Cheltenham, the value might be at prices with horses with that old-fashioned sort of profile. 6 lengths, obviously an arbitrary line, doesn't matter if it's 5 or 7 lengths, but just look for an impressive wide margin winner. A couple to mention, one is Tishan. He's looked really good. Won his point by 41 lengths from a subsequent winner. Won in good style at Exeter. But Paul Nicholls, you've got to imagine, will be training him with the longer term in mind. Some of his opponents will be harder to train for the day. One at a big price to consider with that profile, Mr. Meggitt, bolted up by 12 lengths at Carlisle. That was back in November. So although he's only run once, he has had plenty of time to learn from that and improve. Looked an ordinary race at the time. 3rd and 4th one over hurdles, though. He won hard held there. Hasn't been a British trained winner since Ballyandy 8 years ago. So you're liable to get a bigger price about the British runners. He could be anything. Worth keeping an eye out on the vibes for him. And the final one to mention is Romeo Coolio. It's already been mentioned by the lads. A bit of a buzz horse in the autumn. But when he made his rules debut at Fairyhouse in mid-January, it was when Gordon had that cold going through the yard. Horses weren't finishing out their races. Romeo Coolio won anyway, but he was a bit workmanlike. Second one since. You'd imagine that Romeo Coolio is miles better than that bare form. I'm still trawling through the recordings at the moment. Fair way from having a bet yet. And the bumper can be a race for momentum punters in the last week or so. So my advice is watch as many replays as you can of the entries, listen out to the vibes and run up to the meeting. And given how uncertain it is about which horses will take the occasion in the big field, rather than betting the place market, I tend to split the stakes and back a couple win only.
Yeah, 34.0, Mr. Meggitt, incidentally, Romeo Coolio. I touched on the price earlier, around 9.0. And one I wanted to give a mention to, and I sort of backed the horse prior to him losing to Navan, was Say to Chance. It's the same connections as it's for me last year with the Simon Ear and Willie Mullins. Obviously lost by a head to William Money, who since franked the form there at a big price over the weekend. He's going straight to Punchestown, where Say to Chance looks like he'll get his chance here on his second start in the champion bumper. It'll be probably ridden by Daryl Jacob, meaning that you might see it as a 6th, 7th, 8th string of Willie Mullins based on the betting, but maybe he probably belongs a little bit further up. So who knows? Might be a bit of late money, but one to keep an eye on. But more questions and answers there from the guys, but some decent trends and also little pointers to perhaps selections. But do keep out on those anti-post prices over the next week or so. It doesn't get any easier, Jake. Unfortunately, it's the hunter's chase here. We've got a map for a trend, and then I'll go to you, Jake.
You want to start talking to some general points. As you said, this is one of the least well understood races at the festival. So firstly, only 5 winners this century have won all their starts that season. I think there are 2 elements to that stat. Firstly, fitness. Many of the runners are trained in pointing yards, more an element of getting them to race to get them fit, as used to happen in rules races back in the day. Sometimes forgiving seasonal debuts, focusing on the more recent form can be a pointer. Form needs to be read through that different fitness prism. And secondly, most points and hunters are run at a steady gallop. In that sense, a bit like the bumper. It's a completely different test to that which most runners have experienced during the season. So spotting which horses will improve for a stronger run, extended 3 mile 2, can be key. And last year's race is often therefore the best guide. 8 of the last 11 winners ran the previous year. finishing 1-3, 1-5, 1F2P. Secondly, jockey's always a big part of the amateur riders' races. This is the most complex problem of the three, to work out the jockey-horse combination. Big difference between this and the other two is that the best jockeys don't get on the best horses in the same way. It's a heartwarming feature of this that the genuine amateurs haven't been jocked off by the top riders. And the stat is that 16 of the 22 renewals with amateur riders this century were won by a jockey that had not ridden out their full claim. So you need to assess as best you can how good the pilot is, but you can't just start by saying, oh, what's Derek O'Connor riding? Because the gun qualified riders can be on no hopers here. Thirdly, given all the discussion at the festival and the wider racing being dominated by a tiny number of people, worth noting that in the last 5 years, we've had 3 winners that could be described as proper pointers. Premier Magic, it came to pass, and Hazel Hill. Porlock Bay was a French import, only running pointed and hunter chases for Will Biddock's Pointing Yard. And even Billaway from the Mullins Powerhouse, he'd only run a couple of bumpers, was then in his 4th season running exclusively in hunters when winning. So don't be put off by the fact that you don't know much about the trainer. Pointing Yards regularly win this. And finally, on qualification, you can qualify by winning 2 open points or finishing in the first 2 in a hunter or a mixture. And the time period for qualification is this season and the previous 2 hunter chase seasons. Every year you get British horses moving out of handicap company, trying to run in 2 hunters in quick succession to qualify. The only horse this century to win doing that was Sleeping Night. T-Clipper tried to do it during this season. Sam Crow and Ramillies are a couple of horses that have reverted to points and hunters this season, bringing high ratings. Only one of the last 13 winners qualified in the season they won. Generally pays to focus on the runners that have been established in points and hunters at least the previous season.
Okay, yeah, so maybe it's a long-term plan and one to keep an eye on here. The betting, incidentally, Ferns Lock 4.0, it's on the line 4.6, Billaway 8.2, Premier Magic 9.0, good old Sam Crow, potential runner here 15.0. Jake, firstly, like, would you have a bet on the Hunters Chase in general? Have you ever had to have a get-out clause? And if you do, and what's your sort of takes on the racer?
No, I'm absolutely not a judge of a Hunter's Chase at all. So I definitely sit this one out and get ready for the Mares Chase instead. But having a quick look through, Ferns Lock obviously was a very interesting horse. I think a lot of people wanted him to run in this race last year, didn't they? But obviously they thought he was a bit too inexperienced. He bolted up against Billaway last year and has done well since as well. So he's definitely interesting. I have heard some better judges than I doubt his stamina over this extended 3 mile 2 trip. So perhaps that will be his shortcoming. It's on the Line was probably the one that I thought was most solid at the head of the market. He obviously ran really well last year in the race, finishing 2nd behind Premier Magic, has done really well since, including when beating Billaway at Nace in February. I thought that he had a very solid profile for the race. Sam Crow obviously really leapt off the page to me when I was looking through the entries. I did have very big stamina doubts with him, though. I don't know would he stay 3 mile 2? If he's qualified for the Fox Hunters at Aintree over 2.5, surely that would be perfect for him. If that is the case, then I'll be having him on my radar for that. But the one at a massive price that I just had a quick look through and thought was interesting was Quintin's Man. Now he hasn't actually run in this race before, but he did win on Cheltenham's Hunters Chase night in May last year. He absolutely bolted up that day. He's a very interesting horse because he's come back this season and he's ran in 2 rules races. So he'd ran at Wincanton, won that nice and easily where he beat Laylor of Paul Nichols. And then he ran at Haydock last time over 2 mile 6 where he was staying on very strongly at the finish. I think that trip is probably too short for him. So back up to this course and distance that he's won over would be interesting to me anyway, as much as you can take my opinion with a massive pinch of salt. But he is only a 7-year-old, and looking back at the previous winners, the last winner that was under 10 was 9 in 2014, Tammy's Hill. So, potentially you do need to be looking at an older, more experienced horse.
Okay, 21.0 Quintin's Man at the time of recording. Don, same question to you, I guess. Festival week, a lot going on. This just incidentally is run over the same trip and track as the Gold Cup, but post Gold Cup, are you taking a break from the Hunters ahead of the final couple of races, or what's your strategy on the Friday?
Yeah, again, it's a race I don't have a bet in often. You tend to form opinions through the year, though, despite your best intentions. Watching the Hunters Chases at the meetings that when you're there or paying attention to what's going on. And actually, Ferns Lock is a horse that I've liked for quite some time. Remember, he won at Fairyhouse there November last season, and David Christie, his trainer, afterwards, and he said he wasn't going to go to Cheltenham this year, that he was a longer term project, and that he had Cheltenham 2024 in mind for him. So that's coming to pass now, and he's a lovely horse. He probably wouldn't want the ground to be too soft. He's only 7 now, and as Jake said there, I think Salsify was the last 7-year-old to win it, but he's obviously a progressive horse. He did get caught by It's on the Line at Down Royal, and he looked a likely winner over the last 2 fences. It's on the Line, just nabbed him on the line. But he's just a really nice on goodish ground. Then he'd definitely be top of my list. But I think It's on the Line is a really interesting horse as well. Like he ran a massive race in the race last year. He was outpaced on the run down the hill, and Derek O'Connor, I thought, was superb on him. Just allowed him to get into his rhythm into the home straight, and then delivered him. He stayed on really well. He only went down by 2 lengths in the end. He was only 6 last year, and I think Kingscliff was the last 6-year-old to win it. That's the quality. Attitude Adjuster was 6 when he won it as well. You don't get many 6-year-olds running in the race, so the fact that he was able to run as well as he did as a 6-year-old, that's a positive for me now. Obviously, a year older and a year stronger, and his run the last day at Naas was quite a remarkable race. He and Ramillies had it between them from a long way out. It looked like a 2-horse race from a long way out. Ramillies just totally stopped, and Billaway came from a long way back, as is his wont, and it looked like he was going to get him actually. But when It's on the Line saw Billaway coming towards him, he seemed to pick up again. And like, he's not an easy horse. Derek O'Connor gets a great tune out of him. He was kind of niggling him along with a full circuit to go at Naas the last day. So he's obviously a talented horse, and with Emmett Mullins in his corner, he'll be primed for the day. And the fact that he's got good course and distance form, and the fact that he's now a 7-year-old, a year older than last year, to me, I think he probably should be a wee bit shorter than he is. He probably should be in front of Ferns Lock in the market. You can't discount Billaway. He finally got off the mark 2 years ago as a 10-year-old. He's now 12. He proved the last day at Naas that he still retains lots of his ability, but he's probably a bet in running horse. He's almost certainly going to trade a fair bit longer in running than his SP. So he's a horse to back in running when it looks like he's going nowhere, because he'll come under a ride, he'll make a mistake probably, but you can see him staying on again up the hill.
Okay, yeah, a few fascinating points there, Matt. Take it away with your thoughts on the race.
Definitely endorse what Jake said about Quinton's Man. I think of the outsiders, he's the most interesting. But if you look at form, it's hard to understand why Premier Magic isn't a lot shorter. He's been beaten once in the last 3 seasons when pulling up in this 2 years ago. That was when he was ridden down the inner, apparently panicked. Last year, he was ridden with plenty of light, going the long way around the outside. He was bumped, taken even wider 3 out, pestered by the loose horse on the run-in. Looked to get a bit lonely, but It's on the Line never looked like catching him. And the reason he's not favourite is he's from a small pointing yard most racing fans hadn't heard of before he won last year. He was 67.0, so a lot of people dismiss it as a fluke. And It's on the Line, trained by Emmett Mullins, ridden by Derek O'Connor, and is 4 years younger. I'd say the favourite Ferns Lock is even more talented than It's on the Line, but I'm in the camp that thinks he's a non-stayer. I put him up as an Eyecatcher the other day with the point of view of aiming him at Aintree. I wouldn't be put off by the fact that Premier Magic's 11, Pasha the Polder and On the Fringe, both recent back-to-back winners whose second win came at 11. I don't know what prices you got. I thought he was about 9.0 last time I looked, Daniel, but if he's that sort of price, he's the right play for me at the moment. Yeah,
currently 9.0. And my favorite stat, one of my favorite stats in horse racing, most people on the same sort of line go, it's their do you know stat. It's do you know the Triumph is the 7th race of the year in 2022. And I would go, yeah, but 8th on that list is the Hunter's Chase, which I find truly extraordinary. So it just shows you we've no strong opinion, but everyone's betting on it. So well worth taking that into account. We're going to do a little bit of Cheltenham handicap weights chats. Jake, for you, what stood out, I guess, in an overall sense with the handicap weights? You did a bit of digging in terms of the Irish marks and compared them to previous years, and then your overall sense with any horses that were potential eye catchers for you.
Yeah, of course. So yeah, I do have a good look at how the Irish are treated in terms of their handicap ratings when they come over to Britain. Obviously, the BHA has their own say on that. And the hurdlers went up about £3, the chasers about £2, and then the juveniles about £2.9. So it's very lenient compared to previous years. Like last year, it was 4.3 for the hurdlers, 5.4 for the juveniles, and 3 for the chasers. So we do look like we've had a more lenient year, probably head of that, category of horses. Samajest, he was the one that I, was first looking to find out the mark for as soon as the handicap weights came out, because I thought that he would be, he was given a mark of 140 in Ireland. I thought that he would be given an extra 5, 6, maybe even £7 on top of that by the British handicapper to rule him out of the Martin Pipe. But instead, they've left him on the same mark, and it's since transpired that is because the Irish and the British handicapper kind of came together and agreed on 140. So it makes sense as to how they've come to that mark. But it does leave him as a very short price favourite now for the Martin Pipe, which he'll surely go for, as that is a 0 to 145 rather than the Coral Cup, which is an open handicap, and it tends to be won by more experienced horses than he is. So he was the first one that leapt off the page. Another one who's been very well treated is King of Kingsfield. He's been left on a mark of 140 as well, so £0 change between his Irish and his British mark, which I think makes him very, very interesting for the county. I think that it kind of forces Gordon's hand to run in there. It's between the Supreme and that race, as to where they're going to go with him. And I think now that they've, got that British mark of 140, I think that they kind of have to go for it, because they always talk about how quick he is and, how much speed that he has at home. So therefore, you surely would think that a very fast-paced county hurdle would be right up his street. If you look back at the Grade 1 form of the DRF, he was just ahead of Absurd. He's only got to give Absurd £2. He's quite strongly fancied in the county hurdle market as well. So the fact that he only has to give him a couple of pounds, I think, would make him a very good bet. He's heading towards favouritism now, obviously, as people have started to cotton on to that mark. But I think he's one to very much have on side and have in your book.
Okay, yeah, Matt, take it away with your sort of takeaways.
Just on the lower raises for the Irish horses, I think part of this is the feed through of the process that began in Britain in the summer of 2021, which was understanding that the horses in Britain had just got inflated marks, and therefore they were bumping the Irish horses up a lot to try and equalise it. That's particularly because so many of the better horses are in Ireland now. What they've started doing over the last couple of years is, for horses coming through the novice hurdlers and so on, giving them lower marks. So if you look at the sort of mark a horse will get for winning a Grade 2 novice hurdle now, it's quite a bit lower than it was 3 or 4 years ago. And that's hopefully feeding through to more accurate British marks. Therefore, the Irish marks don't need to be moved so much, and a lot of the heat and light then drops out of the debate. The one I was really interested in going into the weights yesterday was Gabby's Cross. In Ireland, he rated 127 over hurdles, 140 over fences. He'd been chasing for the 2 previous seasons, also ran the Galway Plate and Kerry National this year. In theory, the ratings say he's a much better chaser, but I doubt that. He's not a good jumper of fences. I suspect he's just developed as a racehorse since his previous runs over hurdles in April 2021. And after Listowel, he reverted to hurdles for his last 2 starts, beaten less than 4 lengths off 120 by Buddy 1 at Galway over 2.6, not getting an ideal run, staying on well at the finish. Winner followed up of £9 higher at Cheltenham. Third Shadow Riders recently bolted up with 21 lengths off the same mark. Gabby's Cross then ran in the Attempts qualifier at Punchestown in November. Half a length second to Jodie Ted off 1-2-3. Last 3 out, got boxed in on the home turn. Didn't jump the last that well, ran on, looked to finish with running left. And Jodie Ted was winning off a £19 lower mark than his chase mark. That form hasn't been tested as much as you might have expected, given it was run in late November. The first 5 home, only Alpesh Amin has run again over hurdles, but he did win his only run off a £2 higher mark. Form looks good. Gabby's Cross has a good record fresh, so it's a positive he was put away for this after 4 runs between August and November. Gabby's Cross got 1-3-3 for the Attempts final. I'd expected him to get close to his Irish chase mark. I think he's an absolute blot on the handicap. And the handicap has missed the fact that he's much better suited to hurdles than fences. He very well backed yesterday. And that's a bit of an indication that these days you need to have your list of horses you're interested in betting, particularly the Irish horses, ready for when the weights come out. You used to be able to wait a day or 2 before anything moved and you could cogitate it. Now you have to be ready. He was a sea of blue and odds checker within half an hour of the weights being published.
The good old days, Matt. But joking aside, to say now for a lot of people listening that might have missed the boat, could you potentially be looking at least the same price on the day with probably, better place terms to play with on the exchange, that sort of thing?
No. I think he'll continue to shorten. He's about 13.0 at the moment. So that's a really good point, Daniel. If you've missed the 21.0 he was yesterday, don't think, oh, I've missed the boat, he can't be value now. I think he'll go off a single figure price, probably from the first 2 or 3 in the market. And I think he's got a great chance.
Wow, the price won't even make it to our Cheltenham Handicap show next week, Matt. Who knows? But hopefully it does.
Well,
Donn,
that's a bit silly, wasn't it? I should have actually been a lot quieter about
that. The listeners of Cheltenham Trail are much appreciated, and they're the loyal listeners over the season. I would prioritise over the bandwagoners that come in Cheltenham week. Donn, take it away.
Ruining it for everybody, Matt Toombs. Yeah, look, a good few horses actually that are of interest. The Goffer, I think, is really interesting. He ran a big race in the Ultimate last year. He's got an Irish mark of 144. He was given a British mark of 147, but he was 149 when he finished 4th in the Ultimate last year. Corach Rambler, Fast Slow, and Monbeg Genius, they were the 3 horses to finish in front of Corach Rambler. Is, I think, 13 pounds higher now after his Grand National win, obviously. Fast Slow is 20 pounds higher. Monbeg Genius, I think he's 7 pounds higher after his Coral Gold Cup run, or even after that run. And the Goffer gets to race off a mark 2 pounds lower than last year's mark. He won a charity race there the other day, which should have sharpened him up nicely for going back to Cheltenham. So I think he's interesting for Gordon Elliott. He's obviously high enough in the market now as well, but we know that he handles the track as well. I think the Fred Winter Hurdle is fascinating. Lark in the Morning is 122, just 2 pounds higher than his Irish mark. Nadal, he's been well touted as well. He's got a mark of 134. Miss Manzo actually beat him last time, and she's 130, so she's 4 pounds lower than he is. I think that's obviously he's gone on and won since then, and she hasn't run since then, but she's interesting off that mark. And Nara, horse I'm interested in, she's got a mark of 126, which it was around about what you would have hoped for, but the horse who finished well in front of her in that rated race at Naas, that has been a good pointer to the Fred Winter Hurdle, he's 127, so he's only a pound higher than she is, but just hope that she'll come on from that run. She ran, probably wanted her to run a wee bit better than she did in the end, but she's still a mare to keep an eye on at least. Zenta, she's got 145, 3 pounds higher than her Irish mark. Fully agree with Matt and King of Kingsfield, Jake and King of Kingsfield. Gordon was kind of oscillating between the two, the County Hurdle and the Supreme, but I think, 140, the same as his Irish mark. That should be key in terms of determining where he's going to go. Answer to Cafe got 137, 2 pounds higher than his Irish mark, which was fine for the Martin Pipe Hurdle. He's been running a big race in that. I think that's the type of race that will suit him. His pull out, as the lads were talking about earlier on, he's 5 pounds higher now, a mark of 139 compared to 134, but he's still of interest off that mark as well.
Okay, a lot for your shortlist there, so maybe bookmark the timings here and listen back to that from Jake, Matt and Donn. And I touched on it, there will be a Cheltenham Handicap show next Wednesday evening with Donn and Matt that we will look into that in a lot more detail. Jake, before we go, first of all, I hope you've enjoyed today. And secondly, for the listeners, are you on any good anti-post positions going into the festival? Is there any horses at the prices now that you can't believe is this price and won't be this price in the day? Any nuggets for us? So lots in there, so take it away. I'll give you the final word.
Well, thanks for having me on. Real pleasure. I guess I get to toot my own horn a bit here. Do I get to blow the trumpet?
I'm happy. I can cut it out if I don't. I think it's too much. So take it away.
Krabilly for the plate was one I got on nice and early. Got on around 17.0. Now into favoritism. I think that he's got a cracking chance off a mark of 140. There doesn't look to be too many Irish entries in that are really worrying me. So I'm happy with that position. Percival Legawa on the opposite end of the scale is one that I'm also on a decent price. I think that he's been, put up £7 from his Irish mark there, which is one of the harshest chase differentials. So he might be up against it now. I still think he'll have a good chance. Hopefully Derek O'Connor will be on board, and if he does go to the Kinmure, then I can still see him running a massive race.
Okay, listen, my thanks to Jake. Matt and Donn, don't worry, you'll get a chance to blow some trumpets next week in our final episode.
It wasn't fair. You gave Jake a nice, easy show with the cross country, the bumper, and the Hunter's Chase. So get off lightly.
I'll say the stat again: the Hunter's Chase, the 8th most bet race in the 2022. So if you're not an expert in it, better get going, because it's in a week and a half. It will be as popular as any race out there, which is amazing. But it's obviously the Friday at Cheltenham. just gets those extra turnover, obviously. But yeah, my thanks to Matt, Jake, and Don. We'll be back next week, handicap special. The racing team will be back later in the week, previewing the weekend's action, where there's plenty of football stuff. Check out insights.matchbook.com or search Matchbook Insights for full recap of all our shows, including that Cheltenham preview night. Until then, enjoy the next week.